Welcome to Stop the Fight. And today, we're talking about this weekend's action. Mayweather versus Logan Paul and the fallout. Let's go!
Don't brag about taking my side piece! Don't brag about taking my side piece, though!
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong man, good boy, you know, just...
First, I want to say that if we bet in a similar fashion, this weekend was prosperous for us. The parlay held, the Jarrett Hurd, Arias fight went beyond 8.5 rounds, and the Dubois, Dinu fight went below 3.5. So first, let's just say congratulations to us for that one. Let's talk about the Mayweather fight first, though, because that's what everyone here is here to talk about. Now, this fight didn't matter, guys. It didn't matter. I'm seeing people say, like, oh, Floyd ruined his legacy. His legacy was secured a decade ago, guys. Almost nothing Mayweather's done in the past 5-6 years has mattered at all towards his legacy. At all. He could have gotten knocked out in the first second of this fight, and it wouldn't have mattered. Zero. I hope you guys understand this. This is a 44-year-old Mayweather weighing 150 pounds, fighting against someone who was 190 pounds, and he won all but 2 rounds, if you want to, like, judge it. As a matter of fact, I thought he nearly even put out Logan in, like, the 5th. It looked like Logan was done. But, again, this has nothing to do with Floyd's legacy. Certainly not as a fighter. As an entertainer, yes, his legacy actually continues to grow because more money was made for him, and more money will be made for him in the future should he decide to continue these type of fights. Guys, prize fighting. His legacy was secured long ago, and its exclamation point was put on that Pacquiao fight when he won quite clearly and quite wide. So let's not talk about Floyd's legacy. It's been secure, like I said, for 6-7 years. Now let's talk about Logan Paul a little bit. Let's talk about the actual fight. So in the first 2 rounds, and at the end of the first specifically, Logan Paul was finding a little bit of success. His size really helped him here. Mayweather was weary a little bit of the power, not really of the punching power, but of just the actual mauling strength of Paul. In terms of the punches, they didn't have particularly too much snap on him or anything like that. I mean, this is to be expected. Logan is not a boxer, so you're not going to get snapping jabs and snapping right hands, but you're going to have these grisly mauls, you know, where a person's natural size will come into play. And I actually think at one point Mayweather was made a little bit uncomfortable with that overhand right that Paul threw in the middle round somewhere that hit Mayweather, I think, right on the ear. You know, and Mayweather, I think, was just a tad stunned, but it was due to the fact that Paul is 190 pounds. Paul is 190 pounds. You know, Mayweather's 150 pounds. Weight classes do exist for a reason. You know, Prograis said, oh, this will teach Mayweather a lesson. He put 50 grand on Logan Paul. That was retarded. I mean, no offense. I mean, I shouldn't even use the word. That was a horrible betting decision. It doesn't matter how big a guy is. It almost has no chance of stopping Mayweather. Mayweather knows how to survive. He's been in there with brutal punchers, really heavy-handed guys. We're talking about Maidana. We're talking about Pacquiao. We're talking about Zab Judah. You know, he's been in there with punchers, Berto, in his last true professional fight. You think Shane Mosley, guys who know how to really turn on the punch. You think he can't survive against Logan Paul, even if Logan were to hurt him? Guys, please. Stop talking about Mayweather's legacy. Stop talking about like this fight mattered at all outside of just like the zeitgeist, the memeplex that is, you know, prize fighting in today's day and age. But again, I do want to say that Logan Paul had made pretty significant improvements since his fight that I seen with KSI. He was throwing out that jab often and steadily, which is good. It actually forced Mayweather to stay back a little bit. As you saw, Mayweather consistently was dodging the jab. His cardio, though, wasn't quite there. He was saved by his youth a little bit. The 26-year-old Logan Paul was. So he was more or less done. I thought in the 5th round, I thought it would be advisable for Logan's trainers or corner to stop the fight. Simply because Logan Paul had seemed like he was gassed and started to get hurt by Mayweather at points, especially in that 5th round. I didn't think he was going to make it through. Now, lo and behold, he did make it through, but I think a lot of this had to do with youth. You know, as a young man, you will catch a second wind. You will regain your composure. You will regain your balance, your cardio, your clear-headedness. All that will come back, especially because Mayweather at 44 is just not going to put on the kind of pressure, especially as a tiny man, relatively speaking. He's not going to put on the same kind of pressure he would if Mayweather were 30 years old, or as he said, 21, 25. Of course. But let me tell you guys, the size difference was insane. Like, yeah, it looked big in the weigh-in, but in the ring, it looked like David versus Goliath in there. It looked like Mayweather was fighting a giant. Like, he was fighting Ivan Drago, straight up. And, you know, at points I'm watching this fight, if Logan Paul were actually remotely a fighter, he would absolutely, you know, I think bludgeon Mayweather. But, you know, he's not, and this is what we got. In terms of the actual scoring, again, like, there were no judges, so it just went the distance, and that's that. I thought that if I were to score it, Mayweather won 6-2, or maybe 5-3 or something like that. You know, it felt like an exhibition fight. There were points where, you know, Logan Paul did not know how to hold on the inside. He got hit in the suplex numerous times, and numerous times he was a little bit hurt. You saw him hunch over the second Mayweather would land to the suplex. But he did, you know, like, whoever worked on his jab had the right game plan. You just keep throwing it out. You have such a size advantage. Almost seemed like Vladimir Klitschko style battle, which was the right thing to do. You just keep throwing out that jab. Force Mayweather to use his 44-year-old legs and head movement and reaction to get around that jab and come in. And then when he is inside, just, you know, lay on him. You're 190 pounds. You know, you're 40 more pounds than this guy. You don't need to worry about inside fighting. You just need to worry about not getting hit, but no, he did. That's okay. That's okay. You know, few people can say they walked in there with Mayweather having practically no having no real professional fights and making the distance. That's I think that's a victory in and of itself. And he wasn't embarrassed too. He didn't get his head knocked off. You know, it's Logan Paul, he kind of surprised me a little bit in that sense. I know Mayweather said he surprised him as well. But he surprised me. He did, honestly, much better than I thought he would. I didn't think he was going to make the full 8, but he did. You know, he kind of looked like he could have went more, and that was his second win coming in. Like I said, at the end of the 5th, I thought it was prudent to stop the fight if you're in Logan's corner. But by the 7th round, it looked like he regained his composure and was just in there kind of, you know, hanging in with Mayweather. How many people can say, yeah, I was in there in the 8th round against Mayweather with real gloves on, no headgear? You know, I got to give him props. Like I said, I hope none of you guys bet on the fight. I don't know where you could have. I know DraftKings wasn't taking actual bets. You can get into that competition for the 50 grand. I lost right away. I didn't think they would touch gloves, so doesn't matter. So, yeah, that's that. Mayweather said he's not going to obviously do any professional fights, nor should he. I actually think he would still be competitive at 147, 140, even at such an advanced age. But there's no point to come in there and become a name on someone's resume. You just don't need it. He makes way too much money. His health is way too important. You know, I know he's a philanthropist. Mayweather, he should continue being this entertainment icon that he is now and not worry about professional fighting. He's done with that, guy. Stop asking him to go and fight Crawford or Spence or anyone else. No, he does not need to do any of those things. He needs to continue having fun fights. And I support him 100%. Although the Jake Paul fight, I don't know if he should do it. Jake Paul is taking fighting much more seriously than Logan. And, you know, he's fighting Woodley next, and we're going to see what that's like. If he looks good and stops Woodley, I don't think he should fight. I don't think Mayweather should fight him, as Mayweather will be even older and Jake Paul even better. And Jake Paul seems to be the better athlete out of the two Logan brothers, out of the two Paul brothers. So that's kind of that for the Logan Paul Mayweather fight. Again, I hope you guys had fun. It was again a spectacle, and I love spectacles. Let's talk about some of the actual boxing fights that we had on the card. Let's talk about Jarrett Hurd against Luis Arias. Now, we made money on this fight. This was the second part of our parlay, the over 8.5 in this fight. Now, Jarrett Hurd, unfortunately, looks a little shop-worn. He looks shop-worn, guys. Luis Arias won that fight. And I remember in the opening rounds, I was messaging someone else who had kind of bet with me that, you know, Luis Arias is doing really well, maybe too well. Jarrett Hurd looked lethargic. and slow and getting beat up in those opening rounds. I was worried that Luis Arias may actually stop Hurd. Now, I don't know if it's the amount of wars that Hurd's been in, if it's that kind of like brutal style that he has. You know, he had a pretty good, like, people forget that Jarrett Hurd was a pretty legit fighter with a pretty legit run at 154. He got Tony Harrison, Austin Trout, and Arislandi Lara 3 fights in a row, beating them all. You know, yeah, the Lara fight was a split decision. People thought it could have went, or did go to Lara's way. I thought Lara won the fight, but nonetheless, I thought it was a close fight. That's a pretty good 3-set. You know, those are all champs. That 3-fight run, very good kind of opening to the Hurd world. You know, he was young. At that point, he was 26 years old. The future's ahead of him. And then, you know, you get the loss to Julian Williams where he kind of gets beat up. It's not particularly close. It's not particularly competitive. I mean, he hung in there, but you never thought he was really going to beat Julian Williams. And he was knocked down, of course, in the second round of that fight. Then he has his comeback against Francisco Santana. And he wins almost all the rounds, but he never looks good. But, like, he looks like something happened in between 2017 and 2020. Something, or 2019, something happened. And I really think he may have gotten shop worn. His brawling style, his size advantage that he used to bully people reminds me of, like I said before, Bam Bam Rios, who looked great at 135. But by the time he was at 140, 147, just nowhere close to the same fighter. Just really a walking heavy bag in many ways. So Jarrett Hurd, you know, after the Francisco Santana fight, now goes up to 160 to fight Luis Arias. Now, Luis Arias lost, like I said, recently lost a unanimous decision to Daniel Jacobs. Was not competitive particularly, but he hung in there. And then he got a split draw against Gabriel Rosado. Now, that shows you that the guy has a little bit of fight in him. You know, to go full 12 against Daniel Jacobs, who is a strong 160, big 160-pounder, physically big. He's a big dude with a lot of power. And then Gabe Rosado is a very sneaky fighter. I said his resume, like I told you many times, Gabe Rosado is one of those fighters whose record is worse than he is. He's 24-11. Yeah, that sounds like he loses every other fight. He does, but he is, you know, he is very crafty and he seems to fight to his level. That's what happens with Gabe Rosado. You put him in against kind of like a lower level opposition, he'll fight to that opposition. You put him against some of these better guys, and like with the Daniel Jacobs fight, it looks like he beats them. Then he fought, like I said, Luke Keeler, and Luke knocked him down twice. Really beat him up. And Luke Keeler has like not much power. So again, I disregarded all of that, and for Jarrett Hurd, I believe that with Luis Arias not having much KO power himself, having only 9 knockouts and 19 wins, and Jarrett Hurd kind of seeming lethargic and not a particularly super powerful puncher himself, not an explosive one at least. And at 160, I felt that this was a prime fight to go over the 8.5 to the middle of the 9th round. And at points, like I said, I was worried. In the first 3-4 rounds, I was worried that Luis Arias was actually going to stop him. And he was a significant underdog, too. He was something like plus 790 or something. That means you bet $100, you win 700. That's huge. That's a really big underdog. And so what wound up happening? In the middle rounds, Jarrett Hurd found the stride. Now, all the rounds, Jarrett Hurd was landing his shots. He landed to the body numerous times. You know, Jarrett Hurd has a good inside uppercut. And he landed it numerous times on Luis Arias, but he kept taking these overhand rights in return all the time. Every time he seemed like he would hurt Luis Arias, and at one point in the middle rounds, Luis Arias was I thought, hurt and on the verge of getting stopped. You know, especially there was a cut that had opened up, I think, in the 3rd round. I was worried the entire time that, you know, with the rain, that something was going to go down and this fight was going to get stopped early. But no, the fight went the distance, and Luis Arias was declared the winner. You know, the score totals are pretty close. It was 95-94, 93-97, and 93-96 for Luis Arias. So only one judge had Hurd winning. I thought Luis Arias had won. I thought he banked enough round. There was also a point deduction and a knockdown. Point deduction from Jarrett Hurd for low blows. and Arias was down, which was really a slip in the 9th, but whatever, it doesn't matter. They kind of negated each other. So I thought that Luis Arias had won enough rounds. I thought he won the first 4 rounds. And so from then on, it seemed like, Jarrett Hurd would have to have won the next 6, which he didn't. I think he lost a couple of more in the midway round. It was a close fight. It was an exciting fight. It was actually the best fight of the weekend. At least the best fight that I saw of the weekend. And I thought that, Luis Arias really proved people wrong. And his post-fight interview was actually quite emotional. He was saying how everyone was saying, "Oh, quit this boxing bullshit. You're not gonna make it up there." And I'm not saying beating Jarrett Hurd at 160 is making it, but for a fighter who everyone counted out, this is a huge win. This gets him paid again. This even gets him paid more. Maybe he's brought in to fight a champ. Maybe the rematch. I mean, who wouldn't want to see this rematch? Who wouldn't want to see a rematch between these two guys? But we have to ask what Jarrett Hurd can do at 160 with his size advantage kind of being gone. We have to look at Bam Bam Rios as the parallel, who beat a couple of legit guys at 135 and then just didn't have it on 140, fighting Alvarado in a trilogy, in a brutal trilogy. Great fights, but Bam Bam has been sounding like he's been slurring even like 5-6 years ago. Is that what we want for Jarrett Hurd? He's getting, like, in these 2 fights that he lost with Luis Arias and with Julian Williams, he really got beat up. The Arias-Londy Lara fight, he was kind of beat up. He went so deep in his well that I don't think there was maybe no coming back from that Lara fight. Because literally, really, it's past Lara that he hasn't looked particularly all that amazing. Now, yeah, he got Jason Wellborn out there right afterwards, but something in that 12th round, how he had to go to get that W, maybe that just took 5-10% out of him, and that 5-10% is what separates, the best, the world champs from the guys in the top 10 who kind of get brought in to get beat up. And I feel after this Luis Arias fight, his corner and his team, they really need to sit down and think, what does Jarrett Hurd want to do at 30 years old? He has enough time to kind of retool, but not too much time, guys. Not with the amount of miles he has on him. Some people are a young 30. Some people are an old 30. And Jarrett Hurd is leaning towards the old 30. Golovkin was a young 30. Jarrett Hurd is not, I don't feel. And I think the team, like I said, really needs to sit down and think about what they want to do with this young man. And do they want to think about his health going forward? He can't take the kind of shots he was taking for too long in this game. His chin will crack eventually. And Luis Arias is not a heavy hitter, but at points he had Hurd stunned. He really did. Again, this fight had won us the money. The parlay held, and we'll talk about the Daniel Dubois fight now, I guess. Let's talk about it now because that was the other side of our bet. Now, Daniel Dubois got Bogdan Dinu out there in the 2nd round, 1 shot. It was a pretty good shot, but it's kind of like I said in the previous podcast. The second Dinu seems to face any real adversity and real pain, he kind of gives up. Yes, it was a legit shot that knocked him down in the 2nd round, but it looked like he could have gotten up, but he didn't. He kind of quit. Maybe quit's a strong word, but I think he was just like, you know what? Do I need to take these kind of shots from this kind of puncher in Daniel Dubois? Nah. He was stopped by Gerald Miller, who stops nobody, and Kubrat Pulev in 2019 is clearly not the Kubrat Pulev of 2014 or 13. If you look at those stoppages, he's kind of like, yeah, I don't need to go on. And when a fighter has that mentality, yeah, I don't need to go on, you never want to, it's always risky betting on them. It's always risky. And you always want to err on the side of the other guy's just going to land the first punch, the first heavy punch, especially with a puncher like Daniel Dubois. And this guy's just like, you know what, I already got paid. If I don't get up, no one cares. The British audience wants to see a knockout. They want to keep fluffing up Daniel. And that's kind of what happened. Daniel Dubois lands a right hand in the 2nd round, a very clean right hand, right on the money when Dinu was on the ropes. Dinu goes down, he gets counted out to 8. Also, Dinu looked really fat in there. He came in 20 pounds heavier than his previous fights, and he didn't look good at all. He looked like shit. So, fight went kind of expected. So that was a nice, that parlay gave us a +2 something. So we had a successful weekend. This is our third weekend in the money, or more, I think maybe our fourth. It's been all around a pretty good month. We've been successful at betting and setting up our betting strategies. You know, it's boxing. When you try to bet on boxing, you're not just picking who wins or loses the fight. If that were the case, a lot of people would be making money. You'd probably be right 85% of the time. But it's not that. When you're trying to make money on these bets, you have to find parlays. You have to look at over-unders. You have to look at you know, especially with the Dinu fight the other week, you have to look at what the physics show you. And, you know, you really got to watch the sport. You really got to have a keen eye. Now, I'm not saying I understand the sport particularly well. You know, no one quite, I think, understands the sport all that well. It's just, there's too many intangibles when it comes to it. Someone is sick and not saying, someone just ate a bad meal the day before. A million things can go wrong in a fight. A million things. You know, someone is just that day he woke up on the wrong side of the bed and his chin just can't handle it anymore. The puncher who has no power all of a sudden, you know, packs dynamite. All these things happen in boxing fights, and that's why it's so hard to consistently be right and consistently make money. So I'm happy that we're having another long streak of successive wins, of successive money-making opportunities, you know. Oh, before I forget, let's talk about the Badu Jack fight against Colina. Yeah, that was a joke of a fight. That fight really shouldn't have been sanctioned. I know I put some beer money on there as a joke, but you know, Badu Jack saying he wants to go up to cruiserweight now, I don't know. He kind of got hit a few times by some guy who never fought a guy in the top 20 or maybe even the top 50, and he didn't like those shots either. This guy was a smaller guy. Badu Jack at cruiserweight he'd have to try and pick off the weakest of the champs, but I don't know. He's getting older. His pop is not quite there. If he goes up to cruiserweight, unfortunately, I will be taking the underdogs, which was going to be the fighters that he fights, obviously, every single time. So that's going to do it for me. Guys, if you haven't seen some of these fights, go back and watch him against a Mayweather fight. Is always a Mayweather fight. It's not exciting to watch, but it's the event. It's the atmosphere. So that's it. I'll see you guys on a Thursday. It's over.
I'm gonna go home and break my wife's hip.
Don't brag about taking my side piece. Don't brag about taking my side piece, though.
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong man, good boy, you know, just